After the success of Iron Man, Marvel was now ready to continue plans for the cinematic universe. After Iron Man, Marvel decided to release a movie about another one of their popular characters, the Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk, unlike Iron Man, wasn't all that well received and many consider it to be one of the worst MCU movies. That raises the question, what about this movie was bad? Is it misunderstood? Well, one thing is for sure, it's weird. Rewatching this movie was a nice experience since this was when I jumped on the MCU train. Yeah, I'm an OG. I remember watching it on demand with my dad and begging him to skip to the action scenes. So, is this a good movie? Well, let's find out. Surprisingly, this movie isn't an origin story of any kind. You're able to pick up on what happened to Bruce in the first few minutes. This movie is simply about Bruce running from the military who are trying to capture him and replicate the Hulk formula to create super soldiers. It's a surprisingly really simple plot. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of scenes that help the movie deviate from its simplistic premise. The overall plot is pretty dull. Unfortunately, the pacing doesn't help either. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. There wasn't a lot of scenes where I was bored. However, the pacing isn't fast enough to help with the simplistic plot setup. I feel like this movie could have been shorter since the overall movie is uneventful. The pacing won't have you asleep, but it won't have you leaning on the edge of your seat either. But what about the tone of the movie? Well, it's depressing, but not in a bad way. Just like Iron Man, the movie is grounded in reality and the whole Hulk situation has a lot of gravity to it. So for this movie to be anything but depressing would just be weird. And I like that this movie isn't lighthearted. It just isn't that type of movie. And yes, this was back then when Marvel made serious superhero movies every now and then. And there are a few lighthearted moments and cool action scenes for kids to enjoy too. And to say this movie isn't lighthearted isn't saying it's Batman v Superman. It just lacks any MCU humor, which might explain why people say this feels out of place for the MCU. As for the characters, they're meh. Bruce is depressed about him being Hulk, Betty is a dull love interest, and everyone else is just here to serve the plot. As for the villain, Emily Blonsky, who turns into the Abomination, oh come on, it's obvious, it says so on the cast page. And he's an alright villain. He worked as a fun, somewhat antagonist when he was human, and once he makes his transformation, he's an okay villain. Unlike Obadiah, there's a good reason he's lost any reasoning and is just wrecking the city, since he's just having the time of his life wrecking crap. This was an alright film adaptation of The Abomination. But what about the performances? Sadly, not even that helps. Edward Norton as Bruce does a serviceable job, but doesn't have a lot of work to work with since Bruce is a quiet loner in this movie. Liv Tyler as Betty is just weird. I don't know whether it's her fault or the writers, but Betty is just insanely awkward in this movie. Every scene she's in, she's just off-putting. William Hurt as the General does an alright job. Nothing bad, but nothing extraordinary. The only one who looks to be having any fun is Tim Roth as Emily Blonsky or the Abomination, and he's pretty fun to watch on screen. Overall, the performances are just mediocre. But what about the action? This is a Hulk movie after all. Well, I'm happy to announce that this movie delivers when it comes to action. Each action sequence is what you want, the Hulk letting loose and wrecking someone or something. The CGI is really good too. Hulk looks like he's actually there and the destruction is mostly practical and it all looks good. And finally, the soundtrack. God, I love this soundtrack. It's potentially the best soundtrack in any MCU movie. Composed by Craig Armstrong, this soundtrack perfectly fits the melancholy mood for the movie and every single part of it sounds perfect. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So now you guys are expecting me to probably give this movie a 2 out of 5 or even a 1 out of 5. Well, not really. While this movie is by no means a gem, the plot is alright, the performances are alright, the characters are alright. It has great action sequences with an amazing soundtrack. It's hard to call this movie bad, but it's also hard to call this movie good. So understandably, I'll meet in the middle and give The Incredible Hulk a 3 out of 5. It's certainly better than any other Hulk movie, although that's not saying much. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, then please like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next time. Peace, everyone.
You know something, you little fucking muppets? I'll tell you where I live in fucking Birmingham, Smethwick, you little fucking dickhead. Find out where it is, yeah? Come Birmingham, and I'll bite your fucking face off. Well, I'm a 33-year-old man, mate. You think I'm a little dickhead? I'm a 33-year-old man, I'll fuck you up, you little nut. You sent me the present. Think I'm a dead man, I'm a fucking dead man, you little fucking dickhead. You know what I mean? So let's fuck you, I'm a 33-year-old, 6 foot, big-ass fucking man. So come Smethwick, and I'll bite your fucking face off. You sent me the first message, so next time, check your messages to yourself, you little fucking dickhead.
Oi, stop shouting, who do you think you are?
Come Birmingham now, I'll fuck you up. Come Birmingham now, and I'll fuck you up. And come Birmingham. You want to know where I live? I live in fucking Smethwick. Now come on, and I'll kill you.
Excuse me, you won't kill me because I'm a gangster.
Look, shut up, you dickhead. Now fuck off. Don't send me another message. Fuck off.